In this particular lesson, we will be dealing with the woman with the alabaster box. Our subject for discussion is called to Remember. Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Sunday School lesson as taught by Pastor Rodney Jones, where we go over the International Standard Sunday School lesson, verse by verse, keywords and key phrases. I would like to give one shout out. I am here on location in Memphis, Tennessee, and bumped into two other great YouTube Sunday School teachers. That's none other than my Kojic sister, as I call her, that Sunday School girl, and the other lesson called the official lesson, the Plumbers. It was so good to see them. We had a group picture, and I'm going to put it on this screen. Let's go on with this lesson. Our subject matter for today is called to remember. We're in Matthew's Gospel, chapters 26, verses 1 through 13. Our lesson discussion date is April the 14th, 2019. This is the day of my official pastoral installation this Sunday, April 14th at 4 o'clock, 1700 West 87th Street, Chicago, Illinois. And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. But they said, Not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Now when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. But when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, To what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, Why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached, in the whole world there shall also this, that this woman hath done, be told for a memorial of her. This is the entire reading of our lesson. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word for the edification of our souls, and the people of God said amen. So I am here in my hotel room, and I thought that I would move from our schedule, which we have a very busy schedule here in Memphis, to go ahead and teach this lesson and then get back to the business. We will be skipping and jumping all over. So let's get into it. This is an interesting lesson, as I always say. Our subject matter is what we're really going to focus on. We're not going to focus on every detail of this lesson, because I don't want to pull away the fact that it's called to Remember, which is really dealing with the woman with the alabaster box. This lesson is also taking place in a couple of other gospels, such as Mark or Luke, and such as John in the 12th chapter. So it says, And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples. Now all these sayings would be The events that Jesus talked about, the last days in chapters 24 and chapters 25, those were teachings that he taught about the future events. And now he focuses on from the future events to a specific event that is about to take place within a couple of days of where they were at that point. Now here he goes back to calling them disciples. Originally they were called disciples, which are learners or pupils. Then he called them apostles, which means they were sent out with a task. And now they're called disciples again. And the disciple, remember, is a learner or a pupil. It is an adherent who accepts the instruction given to him and makes it his rule of conduct. This is what these men would do when Jesus is crucified, when he's buried, resurrection, and ascended. They will be empowered to adhere to his instructions, and then they would make it their rule of conduct. By now, these disciples have been with Jesus for a while. So when he finished those sayings, then he spoken to him or them this particular event that was getting ready to take place, which would be the most powerful event ever recorded in history. Verse 2 says that he says that you know that after 2 days is the feast of Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed. Notice what King James says, the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Now, the feast of the Passover is a specific festivity or feast that was taking place. It was to commemorate the memory of the fact that God had delivered the children of Israel out of bondage, out of the hands of Pharaoh, out of Egypt, across the Red Sea into the promised land. And they were to have a feast annually, which would commemorate or cause them to keep in memory or in mind the fact that God delivered them out of bondage. They were in Egypt for about 413 years or so, and God brought them out. And this feast was at hand, and it was a reminder of that. Now, he uses the term Son of Man. Son of Man, I believe he used it at least some 80 times in the Gospels. It is an Old Testament term as well, because those were some of the terms for the prophets. God would call him Son of Man, Son of Man, Son of Man. So he says the Son of Man is betrayed. Now, this betrayal must take place in order for Jesus to be crucified. Number two, Jesus must be crucified in order for us to be redeemed. And notice, number three, that Jesus, throughout his ministry, would work his way, walk his way toward Jerusalem for this particular event to take place. Only he would know the timing and the exact time for him to be where he would be when they grabbed him, because all of the Old Testament sacrifices and lambs and so on and so to speak was a replica or a type of Christ. Christ is the real. He is the real sacrifice that all of the other sacrifices was pointing to. So the day that they were killed and the day that they were captured, the sacrifice is the actual day that they would capture him and kill him at the same time, because everything pointed to him. Now, he used the word the Son of Man is betrayed. The word betrayed means to be delivered up or handed over. Now, I want you to know this. We know who the betrayal is, but it was not predestined that Judas would be the one. Scripture says that it is he who was to betray him, because Scripture knew who it was. But it was never predestined for it to be Judas. It fell Judas's lot because Judas was a thief. It could have been Peter who denied him. It could have been other disciples who walked away from him. But it was Judas because Judas was a thief. And so the lot failed him. Because I want you to remember one key thing. Prior to this lesson, Jesus called all 12, Judas included, and gave them power over the devil. If Judas was the devil all the time, why would Jesus give him power against himself? I just thought that I would bring that in there. Now, Jesus has already warned the disciples of his betrayal and that he would be killed and raised again. He said it in Matthew 26 and 24, Matthew 17 and 22, Matthew 20, 17 through 19. So this should come as no surprise to them because Jesus kept telling them that he would be crucified. And this also shows that Jesus was willing to be crucified even though knowing what would take place in his life. He wanted to do it because he loved us so. Now, this is actually, I believe, the fourth and final expression of Jesus letting his disciples know that he would be crucified. But for some reason, it was not sticking into their head. But he told them on many occasions, I'm going to be killed, delivered, but I'm going to be raised on the third day. Then, now notice how verse 3 says, then. So it appears that while Jesus is telling them that it's going to take place, then assemble. It's as if it was at the same time, because Jesus, I believe, according to the King James, uses the word the Son of Man is betrayed. And as soon as he says this, Matthew lets us know in verse 3, then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. Now, according to the Apply the Word Study Bible, it says, as high priest, Caiaphas was the most influential member of the Sanhedrin, which is the ruling council and supreme court of the Jews. But he feared that the slightest civil disorder would mobilize Roman troops and crush the nation. Now, when you look at referenced in John 11:45-50, it says, when Jesus drew vast crowds and performed astounding miracles, especially his raising of Lazarus from the dead, Caiaphas decided that he would have to be done away with. That's John 11:45-50 when you check that situation out. It's unique to me that the Sanhedrin Council, or a portion of them, would come together for this particular purpose. So the assembly appears to take place after or during Jesus' statement. Also, these are members of the Jewish ruling council. And technically, they don't have nothing to rule on. There's no case that's pending, but we'll move forward. Look at the purpose. The purpose of this assembling is not to vote on the direction of the church according to the will of God. It's not to find better ways for the church to grow. It's not to find whatever the case may be. But the purpose for this gathering is to kill Jesus. And Jesus is already guilty in their eyes. The key is how to get it done from this day forward. So they already found him guilty. Look at the location. So we dealt with the purpose. Now we want to deal with the location. The location of the assembly is not in the temple, but in the home of the high priest, or in the palace. Now this shows the secret time of council, or the secret intent of the council. They came together secretly to see how they can capture and how they can kill him. Now Matthew 26:59 says they also sought false witnesses so they can accuse Jesus and have him killed. They was really wanting him to die. Now the purpose, I want to check out the purpose for them wanting him to die. Number one, they accuse him of blasphemy because Jesus said that he was the Son of God. That's John 5:18. Number two, they want him to die because he healed on the Sabbath. That's John 5:16. And number three, Pilate knew that they delivered Jesus into his hand because of pure envy. That's Mark 15:10. Now you have the chief priests, which were the leading priests. These were the ones who were to take care of the sacrifice for the people. You have the scribes who recorded events. They were the secretaries. These were the ones who knew the law and who could teach you the law. Then you got the elders of the people. These were the rulers and the leaders of the people who were supposed to represent the people, of which Jesus was the people. Yet the three of them came together, not for the growth of the church, but for the sole reason of having a man found guilty, falsely accused, and then murdered. Verse 4 says, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety, and kill him. Now, subtlety or subtlety, some say subtlety, means to bait. Metaphorically and generally speaking, it means fraud, deceit, or guile. In other words, they wanted to take him by trickery Now, Mark 14:1 says they sought how they might take him by craft to put him to death. Luke 22:1 says they sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Now, watch this. It also said, then Satan entered into Judas, and he communed with them how he might betray him into their hands. So while they're trying to figure out the best way to craftily get Jesus and have him killed, Satan now enters into Judas, and Judas goes and communes with them to let them know, I know how to betray him into your hands. And then now the deal is sealed. Verse 5 says, but they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. They wanted to grab Jesus. They wanted to find him guilty. They wanted to falsely accuse him, but they did not want to do it on the feast day because there would be an uproar of the people among them, because this particular event, the Feast of Passover, would draw in thousands among thousands among thousands of people. And many of the people already loved Jesus and they would follow him. If they were to grab Jesus at this moment, there would be the greatest uproar that will possibly ever be recorded in history. So they said that they could not do it on that particular day. Verse 6 kind of shoots us, and notice how he says it. He didn't say that now Jesus went to it. He says, now when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper. Now, number one, Jesus is in Bethany. He's a couple of miles from Jerusalem now. He's getting close to the spot that they would take him, and he's getting close to the place that he would be crucified. Number two, they use the word Simon the leper. At this point, Simon does not have leprosy, but because he apparently had leprosy and Jesus apparently healed him of it, they just coined the phrase Simon the leper. So because Jesus would not be having dinner with him, with his disciples, if he was or had leprosy at that time, because there would be a camp for those of leprosy, and they could not come among the regular people. So he is in Bethany. Now, John 12:1 lets us know that Jesus went to Bethany 6 days before the feast, which is why Matthew says, now when Jesus was in Bethany. So now he's given us this particular story from a narrative view, or a narrative point of view. He's continuing a story. He's not saying that Jesus just went into Bethany, because John said that Jesus was in Bethany 6 days before the feast. And John lets us know that he went to where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus was, and there was a supper that was made for him. It says now in verse 7, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. John lets us know that this woman was Mary, who was the sister of Lazarus and the sister of Martha. He also lets us know that the price of this particular alabaster, and it's not so much as the box, but the perfume that was inside of the box, was worth at least 300 pence. 300 pence is the amount of the salary for a year that a person would receive for a whole year. Now, it was customary for the servant or someone of the house to sometimes bathe the feet of the guests, because they were dealing with dust, dirt, and so on and so forth, or sand. So when they would come in, the lowest of the servant would wash or wipe their feet. This particular woman does something that's unusual. It is so unusual until Jesus makes a fuss about it, because the disciples made a fuss about it. So it says, but when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, to what purpose is this waste? Now, the Bible lets us know in John that Judas was the main one, and the other disciples apparently joined in with him, because his intent and his motive was not right. It was impure because he was a thief. It says, for this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. But John 12:6 says Judas didn't care about the poor, but that he was a thief and he held the money bad, meaning probably he would have sold it for the 300 pence and probably kept 100 for himself. So that's what his major concern was. Now, the contents of this alabaster box was very precious, and it said it probably came from Egypt or somewhere in that area, and it was very costly. History also says that it could have been an heirloom. It could have been something that her family had for a long time, because I doubt very seriously if she could have herself afforded this. So it was something that was kept for a long time, probably in the family. Then not only was the content so important and precious, but the box itself was as important because it had to compress it and keep it in. Once it was broken open, the smell and the aroma would fill the house. There is no seal in the box. Again, it's not like our perfume. You can take it off, use it, and put it back on. That's it. Once that thing is broken, that aroma. But what she's saying is this aroma, this alabaster box, and the contents of this box is not as important as the one who I am about to break this and place it on. She valued Christ more than she valued the most probably valuablest thing in her house. So they begin to murmur and talk about the fact that this should have been sold. Why is she wasting all of this on Jesus? When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. Now, instead of the disciples celebrating what was going on, instead of them being excited about the woman, instead of them pouring in unto her or giving her and said, thank you so much for doing what you're doing, they get upset about her and begin to murmur and speak against her and amongst themselves. But Jesus understood it, and he asked them, how come you're troubling the woman? He says, she have wrought a good work upon me. Verse 11 says, for ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. Now, he's possibly quoting this from Deuteronomy 15:11. It says, for the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. In other words, there is always an opportunity to care for the poor, but there's only this one moment that this woman would have and anybody else in history to care for Jesus and to do something for him. And I say this, make sure we do not miss our moment to do something for the Lord. Verse 12 says, for in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this, that this woman have done, be told for a memorial. Number one, Jesus explains that the reason that she's doing this is because you have to understand, when they buried Jesus, there was not enough time to properly give him the type of burial that he should have had. So what they did was Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, who came to him at night, and my father coined the phrase Nick at night. Those two men went to Pilate and begged his body, took Jesus and put him in an unused tomb, which was near, which I believe was purchased by Joseph of Arimathea. But they did not have time to properly prepare his body for burial because of the time of day and because of the feast. So after taking his body down, they took him and put him in the tomb, and they left, and the women saw him, and then they moved on. But this woman, because the normal thing is they will wrap the body in spices and then do a proper burial, but they did not have the time to do it. This woman, according to Jesus, was doing this against the day of the burial. So she was giving him a pre-burial service, if I can say that term. And Jesus understood it. Now, the woman probably did not understand it because she didn't know what was going on in that area. All she knew is she thought that Jesus was so valuable until she wanted to pour out the contents of this very precious alabaster box on his head. And Jesus says she's doing this against the day of my burial. And then finally he says, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, there shall also this thing that the woman have done be preached as a memorial. So she's doing this as a memorial to him. And Jesus says that we will be preaching this gospel, including her, as a memorial to her as also. So our subject matter is called to remember. We're remembering the events that took place in Bethany. We're remembering the alabaster box that Mary had broken and poured out on Jesus. And we're still talking about this even over 2,000 years later. So yes, Jesus kept his word. He said, wherever the gospel is preached, that this woman is going to be preached as well, or memorialized in the gospel. And right now, however many people are teaching this Sunday school, it's still being preached. This is just the brief summary of the lesson because of time. I got to get out of here. I'm in the hotel room. I got to keep moving. If you like this lesson, give me a thumbs up. Or let me know what things that you like about this particular lesson. Click down there below in the comment section. Remember my motto, teaching the Word of God in the spirit of excellence. And remember the Sunday school motto, a child saved is a soul saved plus a life. Amen.